Forbidden silence. When the rain fell. The rain had been falling for hours, soaking the quiet streets of their suburban Seattle neighborhood. Annie stood alone by the living room window, a glass of red wine in hand. She was 50 now, elegant, refined, with streaks of silver in her shoulder-length dark hair. The house felt too big, without Richard. He had flown to London 3 days ago for a business meeting. Annie had grown used to his frequent absences, but tonight, she felt something different. A loneliness that crept in deeper than usual. She sighed, turning toward the fireplace, pulling her robe tighter around her frame. She hadn't expected anyone. That's why the sound of the front door creaking open startled her. "Hello," she called out, heart skipping. Footsteps. Wet sneakers. A hoodie thrown to the side. "It's me, Roman," said a voice she hadn't heard in months. Her stepson. Annie blinked. Roman stood at the door, rain dripping off his clothes, chest rising and falling, eyes tired but alert. He had grown, taller, broader. At 25, Roman was no longer the boy she had helped raise. He looked like a man now. No, not just any man, a dangerously handsome one. "You're drenched," she said, moving quickly, grabbing a towel. "Why didn't you call?" "Surprise visit. Classes ended early. Thought I'd stop by." She dried his hair, her hands brushing against his scalp. Her pulse quickened. She tried not to look at the way his shirt clung to his abs, but failed. "You still make that hot cocoa?" he teased, smiling. That smile. "Yes," she whispered. "Come, I'll make you some." They sat by the fireplace, cocoa in hand. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just thick. Heavy. Annie's heart beat louder with every stolen glance. He watched her too, and neither spoke of how different things felt now. The space between us. The fire crackled softly, casting a golden glow across the living room walls. Roman leaned back into the couch, legs stretched out, cocoa cup warm in his hand. Annie sat opposite, legs tucked under her, robe pulled tightly. She noticed the way Roman's damp shirt clung to his chest. She shouldn't be noticing, but she was. "So, how's college?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Stressful," Roman muttered. "But I manage. It gets lonely sometimes." Annie nodded slowly. "I get that." Their eyes met. The same thought flickered between them. They were both lonely. In different ways, but lonely all the same. Roman's gaze dropped to her neckline for a second. She noticed. And didn't stop him. She stood. "I'll get you a dry shirt. You can't stay like this." In the hallway closet, she picked one of Richard's old shirts. Large, plain, clean. When she turned, Roman was already there, shirtless. Water still glistened on his abs, and a small, crooked smile curled at the corner of his lips. "I figured I'd change here." She froze. Words died in her throat. His hand brushed hers when he took the shirt. The touch was quick. Electric. He didn't put it on immediately. "Annie," he said softly, "do you remember when you first moved in with Dad?" She blinked. "Of course. Why?" "I had a crush on you then." Her breath caught. "I thought it would go away, but it didn't." The silence between them turned alive. Breathing. Beating. "I was a kid," Roman added, "but I'm not anymore." Annie turned away, heart racing. She didn't know what scared her more, the fact that he said it or the fact that a part of her wanted to hear it. She walked back into the living room, trying to breathe normally. But something had changed, and there was no going back. Whispers in the dark. Annie lay in bed, eyes wide open. The ceiling above her barely visible in the dim glow of the night lamp. Outside, the rain had slowed to a whisper, but inside her chest, a storm brewed. Roman's words echoed over and over. "I had a crush on you. I'm not a kid anymore." She closed her eyes tight. This was wrong. She had raised him, hadn't she? But he was never hers. Not really. Not by blood. Not by bond. Still, her thoughts were shattered by a soft knock on her bedroom door. "Annie." Roman's voice. Low. Careful. She quickly sat up, clutching the blanket. "What is it?" Couldn't sleep." "Roman, it's late." "Can I come in?" "Just for a minute." She hesitated. Then, "Yes." He opened the door slowly. He wasn't wearing a shirt, just pajama bottoms. The low lamplight caught the shadows across his chest. He looked more like a man than ever before. Roman stood at the edge of the bed. Annie couldn't move. "I keep thinking about what I said." "I didn't mean to make things weird," he said.
"They're not weird," she lied.
He sat on the edge of the bed. Their legs almost touched. "I don't want you to hate me," he whispered. "I could never hate you," she said, softer than she meant. His fingers brushed hers. Annie didn't pull away. "You looked so alone earlier," Roman whispered. "I know how that feels." Tears welled in her eyes. How had he seen through her like that? His hand reached up, gently touching her cheek. "You don't have to be alone tonight." Annie's lips parted. To speak, to stop him, to say something, but nothing came. Roman leaned in, and for a breathless moment, everything in the world stood still. Then, she turned her face away. "I can't," she whispered. "Not like this." Roman pulled back, nodding slowly. "I understand." He stood up, started walking toward the door, but paused. "When you're ready, I'll still be here." And with that, he walked out, leaving Annie breathless, her heart pounding louder than the rain outside.
Venom in the silence. The sun finally broke through the clouds the next morning, casting soft gold light across the wet garden. Annie stood in the kitchen, lost in thought as she poured herself a coffee. Her hands still trembled from the night before. Roman's words, his touch, his presence, they haunted her, lingering like perfume on skin. She didn't hear Roman walk in until he said, "Morning." She turned. He was smiling, bare feet on the wooden floor, wearing the shirt she'd given him. It fit him snugly. Too snug. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, trying to sound normal. He smirked. "Eventually." Before she could respond, Roman flinched. "Ow," he muttered, grabbing his leg. "What happened?" Annie moved closer. "Something bit me, I think. Outside. Snake, maybe? Or just a bug. But it stings like hell." "Let me see," she said, worried now. He pulled up his pajama pant. There, near his ankle, was a red, swollen mark. Long, thin. A puncture. Her face paled. "That's a snake bite, Roman." They rushed to the ER. He was dizzy by the time they reached. The doctor confirmed it, a rare, neurotoxic snake, probably carried in from the woods during the storm. "He's lucky," the doctor said. "Most people wouldn't have made it in time." They kept him overnight. Annie stayed. Her hand never left his. But something strange began to happen over the next few days. Roman's body changed. He grew hotter to the touch. His muscles tightened. His voice deepened. His eyes grew darker, more intense. And then came the biggest shock of all. He came out of the shower one night, towel wrapped around his waist, and Annie gasped. "Roman." He looked down, then met her eyes. "I know." It wasn't normal. The bite had done something. Altered something. His body had changed. 15 inches. Annie stepped back, heart hammering. "What is happening to you?" she whispered. Roman walked closer. "Maybe this is nature's way of telling me something," he said. "Or maybe it's fate." She couldn't breathe. Something had awakened. Something dangerous. And unstoppable. Unveiling desires. The days after Roman's accident felt like a strange blur. The weather outside was still stormy, but inside the house, the air had thickened. Every glance, every word between Annie and Roman carried an invisible weight. Roman's transformation was undeniable. He was stronger now, his body more defined. Every time he passed her, Annie could feel the magnetic pull between them. It wasn't just his physical change. It was something deeper. Something she couldn't explain. She tried to keep her distance. She told herself it was wrong. He was her stepson, after all. But the more she told herself that, the harder it became to ignore the undeniable tension between them. One evening, as the rain poured heavily against the windows, Roman found her sitting alone in the living room, reading a book. "Annie." His voice was softer than usual. She looked up, forcing a smile. "Roman, you're up late." "I couldn't sleep," he said, stepping closer. Annie's heart raced. "Maybe you should rest." "I can't. Not while you're still awake." Her breath hitched in her throat. Roman sat next to her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, with an intensity she had never seen before. "Do you ever wonder, Annie," he whispered, "how far we could go? How much we could feel, if we just let ourselves?" Annie's chest tightened. The air around them felt charged, like the calm before a storm. She tried to pull back, but the way Roman looked at her, it was impossible to ignore. His fingers brushed hers, sending a shockwave of heat through her. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, almost pleading with herself as much as him. "We can't." Roman didn't respond. Instead, he reached out and cupped her face, his thumb tracing her jawline. His touch was gentle, but it sent an electric pulse through her body. She couldn't move. She didn't want to move. "You've always been beautiful, Annie," Roman said, his voice low and steady. "And I've always felt something for you, even when I was too young to understand it." Annie closed her eyes. She wanted to stop. She wanted to push him away. But the truth was, she didn't want to. Roman leaned in slowly, his lips hovering just inches from hers. "You don't have to be afraid," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. "I won't hurt you." And before she could stop herself, before she could even think, she kissed him. The kiss was slow, hesitant at first, but then it deepened, as if all the years of unspoken longing between them had finally erupted. Annie's mind raced. This was wrong. This shouldn't be happening. But her body betrayed her. She had wanted this. She had wanted him for so long. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing heavily, hearts racing. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Roman replied softly. "Just let it happen." The edge of temptation. Annie lay awake that night, the memory of the kiss still lingering on her lips. She couldn't escape it, no matter how hard she tried. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Roman's face, his eyes filled with desire, and his touch that had burned into her skin. She had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. The next morning, Roman was different. He was quieter, more distant, as if the night before had shifted something between them, something they couldn't undo. He was still recovering from the snakebite, but there was a new fire in his eyes, something she couldn't ignore. Annie tried to avoid him, but it was impossible. He was everywhere she went. His presence filled the space between them, pulling her in every direction. That afternoon, when she was in the kitchen making lunch, she felt him behind her. "Annie," Roman said softly, his voice low and intense. "We need to talk." She froze, her heart hammering in her chest. "About what?" "About last night," he said, stepping closer. She could feel the heat radiating from him, even though there was still some distance between them. "I know you're confused. But I'm not." She turned to face him, her eyes meeting his. "Roman, this isn't right. We can't do this." "I know it's wrong," he whispered. "But it feels so right." She shook her head, trying to ignore the feelings swirling inside her. "You're my stepson." "I don't care," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't care about the rules. I just care about you." Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to pull away, to stop this madness, but she couldn't. Roman reached out and gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing over her lips. "You don't have to be afraid. I won't hurt you. I just need you." Annie closed her eyes, trying to fight the desire that was building within her. She couldn't let this happen. But every fiber of her being screamed at her to give in. The pull between them was undeniable. She had never felt anything like this before. The attraction, the intensity, the danger of it all. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Annie jerked away from Roman, her heart racing. "I'll get it," she said, trying to sound normal as she hurried to the door. But when she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Standing there was Richard, her husband. The man she had married, the man she had been with for years. But the look in his eyes told her something had changed. "I need to talk to you, Annie," Richard said, his voice hard, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and hurt. The truth comes crashing down. Annie's heart skipped a beat as Richard stood in the doorway. His expression was dark, and the tension in the air was thick. For a moment, she stood frozen, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to face him. Roman stepped back, his body stiff, as if he sensed the shift in the atmosphere. Annie's mind raced. She hadn't expected Richard to come back so soon, especially not when things had already become complicated. "Richard, what's wrong?" Annie asked, her voice trembling slightly. Richard's gaze never left her as he pushed past her and entered the house. His eyes were filled with anger and something else, a deep hurt, a betrayal. "I need to know what's going on, Annie," Richard said, his voice low and heavy with emotion. "I've been working long hours, but I know something's been wrong. I feel it. Something's not right." Annie swallowed, trying to calm her nerves. "Richard, it's been a stressful time. Roman's recovery from the snakebite and everything." Richard shook his head, his eyes narrowing. "No, it's more than that. I know it is. I saw you two last night. In the living room." Annie's heart dropped. The walls felt like they were closing in around her. She could feel Roman's presence behind her, but she couldn't turn to look at him. The weight of the truth was crashing down on her. "You saw us," she whispered, barely able to speak. Richard nodded, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Yes, I did. And now I'm starting to understand. You're sleeping with him, aren't you?" Roman took a step forward, his hand clenched into a fist, but Annie quickly placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. The air in the room was thick with tension, and Annie knew that if Roman spoke, things could escalate quickly. "No," Annie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think. We didn't mean for this to happen. It's complicated. Complicated." Richard's voice grew louder, his anger spilling over. "This is not just complicated, Annie. You've betrayed me. You've betrayed us." Annie felt her chest tighten. The guilt, the shame, the fear, it all hit her at once. She had never intended for any of this to happen. But now the truth was out. Richard knew. And there was no escaping it. "I never meant for this to happen," Annie said, her voice breaking. "But Roman, he's not just my stepson. There's something between us. Something I can't explain." Roman stood silently behind her, his body tense, but his gaze was soft, almost apologetic. He hadn't wanted things to get this far. He had never imagined it would lead to this moment, to his father's betrayal. "I don't know what to say anymore," Annie continued, tears welling in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you, Richard. But something inside me, something has changed." Richard stepped closer, his face red with fury. "You have no idea how much you've hurt me. How much you've hurt us." Roman finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "We didn't plan for this. It just happened. And I never wanted to hurt you, Dad." "Don't call me that," Richard shouted, his voice filled with rage. "You're not my son. You've never been my son." Annie flinched, the words cutting deeper than she expected. She knew Richard's anger was justified, but it didn't make it any easier to bear. The man she had once loved, the man she had once shared everything with, was now nothing more than a stranger in her eyes. "Richard, please," Annie pleaded, her voice softening. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I'm so sorry." But Richard wasn't listening. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Annie stood there, frozen, her heart racing, her mind in chaos. Roman was still standing behind her, but there was no comfort in his presence now. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no going back. Broken trust. The air in the house was thick with tension after Richard's outburst. Annie stood still in the living room, her mind spinning, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The weight of her actions, the betrayal, it all felt like it was crushing her chest. She knew that things could never go back to how they were before. Roman stood behind her, his presence silent but heavy. He didn't know what to say. He had never imagined it would escalate to this point. He never wanted to hurt Richard, or Annie. But what they had felt was undeniable. After a few moments of silence, Roman finally spoke. "Annie, I never wanted this to happen." His voice was soft, tinged with regret. Annie turned to face him, her heart in turmoil. "Neither did I, Roman. But now we have to deal with the consequences." She wiped away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. The truth had come crashing down, and she had no idea how to pick up the pieces. Roman took a hesitant step toward her. "I never thought it would go this far. I swear, I never wanted to hurt Richard or you." "I know," Annie whispered, her voice breaking. "But we can't undo what's been done." Roman reached out and gently touched her shoulder, his hand warm against her skin. "I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose what we have." Annie stepped back slightly, her heart racing. "But we've already lost it. Richard knows now. He can never forgive me for this." Roman's face softened. "We don't know that. We can still fix this. We just need time." But Annie shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Time. Time won't fix this, Roman. The trust is gone. Everything is broken. There's no coming back from this." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The reality of their situation was settling in, and it was harder to ignore now. Just then, the doorbell rang. Annie froze, her heart skipping a beat. She wasn't sure she was ready to face anyone else, especially after everything that had just unfolded. Roman glanced at her, his expression uncertain. "Do you want me to answer it?" Annie hesitated, then nodded. "Please." Roman went to the door, and when he opened it, Annie's worst fear was confirmed. Standing on the doorstep was Richard, his face red with anger, his eyes still filled with hurt. "I need to talk to you," Richard said, his voice calm but edged with something dangerous. Annie's heart pounded in her chest. She had hoped he would cool down, but it was clear that wasn't going to happen. She walked toward the door, her legs feeling weak under her. "Richard, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen," she said, her voice trembling. Richard didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped into the house, his gaze sweeping over Annie and then Roman. His eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of them both standing together. "You don't get to apologize," Richard said, his voice cold. "You don't get to act like this is just some mistake. You've shattered everything." Annie opened her mouth to respond, but her words caught in her throat. There was nothing she could say that would make this right. She had crossed a line, and now there were consequences to face. "I don't know what I was thinking," Richard continued. "I thought I knew you. I thought I could trust you, Annie. But this is unforgivable." Roman stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "I never wanted to hurt you, Dad. I swear." Richard turned to him, his face hardening. "Don't call me that. You're not my son. You never were." The words hit like a slap in the face. Roman's expression faltered for a moment, the pain in his eyes evident, but he didn't back down. He knew the truth. He had made his choice. And now he had to live with it. Annie felt the tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had cried enough. The damage had been done. There was no turning back. "I never wanted this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But it's too late now. Everything is broken." Richard's eyes softened for a brief moment, as if he wanted to say something else, something kinder. But then his anger flared again, and he turned away. "I don't know who you are anymore," Richard said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I can't stay here. Not after this." With that, he walked out the door, slamming it behind him. Annie stood there, her body shaking, the weight of her decisions crashing down on her. Roman remained by her side, but his presence was no comfort anymore. The house felt empty, cold. It had all changed, and it would never be the same again. A web of deceit. The door slammed shut behind Richard, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Annie stood frozen in place, her heart heavy with guilt and confusion. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayals, the pain she had caused, seemed to settle in her chest like a stone. There was no escape from it now. Roman didn't speak right away. He just stood next to her, his expression unreadable, his body tense. He had witnessed Richard's fury, felt the sting of his rejection, and yet he remained by her side. But Annie could tell that the air between them had shifted. The tension was palpable, and she wondered how long they could continue to pretend that everything would be okay. "I never thought it would get this bad," Roman said finally, his voice low and strained. "I never imagined Richard would react like that. But I can't change what's happened." Annie swallowed, her throat tight with emotion. "Neither can I," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I've ruined everything. I don't know what to do anymore." Roman reached out, his hand gently brushing against her arm. "We'll figure it out. We have to." She turned to look at him, her eyes filled with desperation. What if there's no fixing it? What if it's already too late? Roman's gaze softened, but there was an edge of something darker in his eyes. "We can try. But if Richard isn't going to listen, then we need to figure out what we're going to do next." Annie closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. What could she do now? Richard was gone. He had left her. And for what? For a mistake she could never take back. Roman was right. There was no going back. The only way forward was through the wreckage they had created. But was she ready to face the consequences? Later that evening, as the moonlight streamed through the windows, Annie sat on the couch, lost in thought. Roman had gone to bed, but her mind was still racing. She replayed every moment, every conversation, every touch, as if she could somehow undo the damage. But the truth was, it was too late for regrets. She had already crossed the line. The sound of her phone vibrating on the coffee table startled her. Hesitant, she reached for it, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the name on the screen. Richard. She hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Hello," she said, her voice trembling. "Annie." Richard's voice came through, strained and broken. "I didn't want to leave things like this. But I can't. I can't just pretend like nothing's wrong." Annie's heart lurched in her chest. "Richard, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted any of this to happen." "I know," Richard said, his voice softer now, filled with regret. "But the truth is, I've been lying to myself too. I saw what was happening, and I ignored it. I thought I could control it, but now everything's falling apart." Annie's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" Richard sighed heavily, and for a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line. "Annie, there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you earlier." Annie's pulse quickened. "What is it, Richard?" "It's not just you and Roman," Richard said, his voice low. "There's someone else. Someone who's been pulling strings from behind the scenes." Annie frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "Who?" "Someone who's been orchestrating everything. The affair. The betrayal. Everything. And it's not just you who's been hurt in all of this. I've been manipulated too." Annie felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you talking about? Who's been manipulating you?" Richard took a deep breath. "It's not what you think. Someone from my past has been influencing everything, pulling the strings to make sure we're all in this mess. And I didn't see it until it was too late. Annie felt her head spin. Who could possibly be behind all of this? Who had been orchestrating their destruction? I don't understand, she said, her voice shaking. Who's doing this, Richard? Who's been pulling the strings? I'll tell you everything, Richard said, his voice grim. But not tonight. You need to be ready for the truth. The whole truth. Annie felt the weight of his words settle heavily on her chest. She didn't know if she was ready for the truth, but she knew that she had no choice. The web of lies and deceit had been spun too tightly, and now it was all coming undone. As the night stretched on, Annie sat in the silence of the house, her mind swirling with questions. Who was behind this? Who was responsible for tearing their lives apart? And what was Richard going to reveal? She didn't know what to expect, but she knew that whatever it was going to change everything once again. The truth unveiled. The silence in the house was deafening. Annie sat motionless, her mind racing as she waited for Richard to explain the truth he had promised to reveal. The words hung in the air, unanswered, and the tension in the room felt like it could suffocate her. Who was behind everything? Who had been manipulating them all? The night stretched on, the hours passing with excruciating slowness. Annie couldn't shake the feeling that the walls around her were closing in. What if the truth was worse than she could ever imagine? What if the betrayal went deeper than she thought? Her phone rang again, breaking her from her thoughts. It was Richard. Annie's heart skipped a beat. She took a deep breath before answering. Richard, what's going on? What is this truth you've been talking about? There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Richard spoke, his voice shaky and filled with a sense of dread. Annie, I don't know how to say this, but I need you to listen carefully. This isn't just about you and Roman. There's someone who's been pulling the strings from the very beginning. Someone you know. Someone who's been watching us, planning this whole thing. Annie's stomach dropped. Her pulse quickened. Who, Richard? Who has been doing this? Richard's voice lowered to a whisper. It's your sister, Rachel. Annie froze, her breath catching in her throat. What? Rachel? No, that can't be right. Why would she? I know this is hard to believe, but it's true. Rachel has been orchestrating everything. She's the one who set this whole thing in motion. She's the one who made sure I saw what I saw. She's the one who made sure you and Roman. Stop, Annie interrupted, her voice trembling. Why would Rachel do this? What's her motive? Richard sighed heavily. She's always been jealous, Annie. Jealous of everything you had. She was never happy with her life. Always bitter. And when she found out about your marriage, your perfect life, she decided to tear it all down. She wanted to destroy everything. She wanted to take everything from you. Annie's mind was spinning. The truth was too much to process. Rachel. Her own sister? The one person she trusted most in the world? Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Annie demanded, the shock turning to anger. Why keep this from me? Richard's voice was heavy with regret. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't want to believe it myself. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized that she was behind it all. She used me to get to you. She used my insecurities to turn me against you and Roman. Annie's heart ached. Her sister, the one person she thought she could rely on, had been playing her all along. She had been the one pulling the strings, watching from the shadows as Annie's life crumbled. This is all her fault, Annie whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Yes, Richard said, his voice full of sorrow. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew how to manipulate us. And she knew how to make you and Roman fall into her trap. Annie's mind was reeling. She had always known Rachel to be a bit envious, but she never imagined it would go this far. Never in her wildest dreams could she have imagined her own sister would betray her like this. I need to confront her, Annie said, her voice fierce. I need to know why she did this. I need to hear it from her own mouth. I don't think that's a good idea, Richard cautioned. She's dangerous, Annie. She's calculated and manipulative. If she's been able to do all of this, then she'll have a plan for dealing with you. You can't let her control this any longer. Annie's thoughts raced. She had to confront Rachel, but Richard was right. Rachel wasn't just a jealous sister anymore. She was a mastermind who had systematically torn apart everything Annie held dear. And now, Annie had to figure out how to stop her before it was too late. I'll take care of it, Annie said firmly, her mind made up. I'm going to find her, and I'm going to make her face the consequences. As she ended the call, a strange feeling of resolve settled over her. For the first time in what felt like forever, Annie felt like she had control. She would confront Rachel. She would face her past and make sure that everything she had worked so hard for would not be destroyed by a lie. But as Annie turned to leave the house and confront her sister, she didn't know that Rachel had been waiting for this moment. Rachel had planned for Annie to make this very move. She had known she would be coming. And the final confrontation, the one that would decide everything, was just about to begin. Epilogue. In the days that followed, Annie and Rachel finally came face to face, their pasts colliding in a storm of raw emotions. The truth of their shattered relationship, the web of lies that had been spun, and the deep betrayals that had gone unnoticed for so long were revealed. Annie realized that no matter how deep the wounds ran, the only way to heal was to confront the pain and the person who had caused it. It was the only way to move forward. And as for Roman, he had made his choice. He had chosen to stand by Annie, despite the chaos. Their journey together was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were no longer bound by the past. The truth had set them free, but only time would tell if they could rebuild what had been lost. The end.